You may not be looking forward to it, but here before long, it's going to be time for your house's spring cleaning. Does anybody do that? Yeah, okay, I figured that was the case. I mentioned to you before that we have 4 young children, and I'm going to show a couple of shots of home, of a home that is. I want you to know for each of them, this is not my home. It's far too clean to be my home. But yeah, we really have to clean up on a regular basis, it seems like, and probably much more even serious cleans than once a year. But I think just about everybody tries to do that. Maybe around once every year. You want to try to get rid of all the previous year's clutter that you have in your house. You and I both know what's going to happen, though. That same house is going to get filled up with something again, and the never-ending cycle is just going to repeat itself. As much as we might like to keep our houses relatively empty, the reality is our houses aren't made to be empty. They're designed to be filled. And that's not just true of our body's homes, but it's also the case of our spirit's dwellings. Our earthly homes, we can clean them out, but they're not going to stay that way. They're going to get filled with something again. And similarly, we can clean out our spiritual homes, but they're not going to stay empty. They're going to get filled with something again. And so it's really not a matter of if something is going to be in our homes. It's a matter of what is going to be in them. And we're not really going to be focusing on our earthly dwellings tonight, although we could do so. It'd take a lot longer for us if we did. What we're just going to do is we're going to focus on our spiritual houses that we build in this life. But just like our earthly homes, our spiritual homes can get filled with clutter, things that aren't really that good that shouldn't be in them. We're going to be looking at Matthew chapter 12 tonight, and this is going to be maybe a little bit of an unorthodox lesson for me because we're mainly going to be concentrating on only 3 verses. Matthew chapter 12, verses 43 through 45. But then toward the end, I'm going to jump text, if you'll allow me to do that, and we're going to go to Ephesians, the 4th chapter, and we'll spend the rest of our time in that. But for right now, as we start, I want to focus on Matthew chapter 12 and 3 really obscure verses of Jesus' teaching. And it's kind of like Matthew 9 this morning. A while back, I was looking at this passage, and it really jumped out to me. I thought, you know what? These 3 verses that, at least from my perspective, I hope it's not true from yours, you've probably done better with this than what I have. I thought, I have been overlooking these 3 verses my whole life, and if I'd have spent a little more time on these, Christianity would have made a whole lot more sense to me a lot earlier than what it has. Jesus says in verse 43 of Matthew 12, when an unclean spirit goes out of a man. Now, I just want to state this, and you probably recognize this already, that the unclean spirit here is a demonic entity. And there's a whole lot that could be said about demons. Demons are really interesting creatures. Here recently, we did a whole quarter study in Conway Church on demons, the ministers of hell. And part of the reason we did that was because of a follow-up from the previous year's study, angels, the ministers of heaven. and both of those are really interesting. I'm sure you've had studies on those in your past too. The point of which is this, to somewhat cover it the way it needed to be covered. We devoted a quarter to that. I don't think you want to be here for a quarter worth of lessons tonight. I know I don't want to either, so we're not going to do that. And we're just going to try to leave demons out of it because there's so many tiers to that. And I want to look at this passage more generally. When an evil influence goes out of a man, because that's truly what demons are. They're evil influences. Now, I want to mainly deal with Matthew 12 before we go to Ephesians 4. There's going to be one exception to that. Let's go to Ephesians 4 right now. I want to place these 2 passages in our mind alongside one another and notice the similarities in them. Ephesians 4, Paul writes this in verses 17 through 22. He says, no longer walk as the rest of the Gentiles, meaning as unbelievers do. And here's the reason we don't want to do that. Verse 19, who have given themselves over to lewdness, to work all uncleanness with greediness. And as a conclusion, he says in verse 22, concerning your former conduct, put off the old man. You see what he's saying here? Get rid of the evil influences in your life. And if you want to look at our lives in terms of houses, Purge out the wickedness from your life. He says the same thing that Jesus does in Matthew 12. The only difference, really, if you'll notice, is there's no mention of demons here. And I think that makes it easier in the 21st century for us to understand. And so we're going to look at it from that perspective, that each of us, just like in our homes we can get clutter, we can get spiritual clutter in our heavenly homes as well. We can have issues with our souls, and we need to expel wickedness from them. Well, thankfully, that's something that can be done. But when we get rid of evil in our lives from our spiritual homes, that evil is going to want to take up residence somewhere. And if we've told that evil, you're not welcome in my life, it's going to try to go find a new house in which it can stay. Okay, now we're back in Matthew 12, and we're going to stay there for a while, okay? Matthew chapter 12, the fullness of verse 43 says, when an unclean spirit goes out of a man, he goes through dry places seeking rest, and he finds none. The dry places being referenced here is probably wildernesses, understanding the Bible lands, something that would probably make a little bit more sense to us. It's like a desert landscape. The evil influence goes out of a person's life when we kick it out of our spiritual homes, but then it goes searching for a new home. But in the process, it feels like it's passing through a desert trying to find a place to rest. Now, I want to ask you something. Out in the middle of say, the Mojave Desert, you think that's a place that you would put together a bed and just lay down in the middle of the day? Or get you a lazy boy from a furniture store and put it out in the middle of the desert and kick back in that midday sun? Oh, this is wonderful, isn't it? You wouldn't do that, would you? It's not very restful. It's not an inviting place. So you see what's being stated here about evil? When you kick evil out of your spiritual home, it needs somewhere to stay. And so it's going to go look for a new house, but the process to it is like it's passing through a desert and a person trying to find rest, and it's not a very restful place. Translation, it has difficulty finding a new home, but it still needs somewhere to stay. Some house. And then there's a house that comes to this evil influence's mind. Oh yeah, I remember that old place where I ought to say, maybe I'll go back there and see what's happening now. Maybe I'll be more welcome than what I was before. Verse 44, then he says, I will return to my house from which I came. Now, that's what goes through the mind of this entity that's being spoke of, that is an influence for evil. I want you to think about when you go away from your home for a time. Usually you and I, we do that for relaxation. And we'll go on vacation somewhere. I don't know what vacation means to you. To me, it means exactly what you see. It means a beach, it means heat, and it means humidity. I hear people from where I come about, I don't like heat and I don't like humidity. I say, you're crazy. If I could have that all day, every day, I would be tickled pink. I love heat, I love humidity, and I especially love the beach. You guys don't have to go very far for that, do you? You live in a pretty nice, comfortable place as far as temperature goes. We go on vacation for a while, and that's really nice. I don't look at this trip as vacation, but in a sense, it almost kind of feels like it. Outside, it's really nice. I'm enjoying the time with you, but Thursday, the good Lord willing, Thursday evening, I'm going to be arriving back in my place where it's not so hot and it's not so humid, but you know what? That's okay with me too, and here's the reason for that. That place to me is home. I love staying with the Pattersons. I could do that for a really long time, but I also miss my family and I miss my house. And when I pull back into that driveway at Missouri and I see those familiar sights, and I open up that door, it's going to feel so inviting to me. Well, that's what we do after we've been away from our house for a while. And do you understand that evil does the same thing with us whenever we kick it out? But remember, it's not a situation like us. We like to get away and go on vacation. It hasn't been on vacation. It's been out in the middle of the equivalent of a hot desert that's uninviting, where it's had no rest. And it wants to come back home where it once was. And it sees that comfort level. It knocks on the door. And here's potentially what it finds in verse 44. When he comes, he finds that house in a very dangerous condition. Empty, swept, and put in order. Now, in one sense, it's a really good condition. Remember, the evil has been kept out. It's been swept, and it's been cleaned up. And the few things that are there are neatly arranged. But here's the issue with what's going on. It's empty. Are houses made to be empty? Absolutely not. If you come across an empty house, even if you weren't looking out in the front yard, what does that tell you about that house? Someone's probably either trying to sell it or they're trying to rent it out. It's been prepared. All the junk has been cleared out. The few things that are there are nice and tidy, but it's empty because it's ready for somebody else to move into it. Folks, it's a very dangerous thing if our spiritual houses are left empty. It's a wonderful thing to clean the evil out of those homes. But if we leave it in that condition, we have set ourselves up for utter disaster. Just like our earthly homes, our spiritual homes are not made to be empty, they're made to be filled. And when evil comes back looking for its old home and knocks on the door, and we open it up just to see who it is or what it is that's there, and we see that it is evil, and evil looks in and says, man, there's more space here than when I left. You know what happens when that's the case? Not only is that evil influence welcomed right back into our lives, but there's a whole lot more that's going to be coming with it. Verse 45 of Matthew 12, Jesus says, then he goes, and he takes with him 7 other spirits, more wicked than himself, and they enter and they dwell there. Jesus is telling us a very important thing that I won't speak for you, but I will for myself, that I ignorantly overlooked for about 30 years of my life. This helps to make so much more sense of Christianity. How many times have you and I have been guilty of looking at this Christian life? Well, it's all about these bad things that we don't do. Well, it's not all about that, even though it is in part about that. Brothers and sisters, Christianity is at least just as much, if not even more so, about the good things that we do. And if we have an absence of good from our lives, even though there is no evil, our houses are empty, and that's such an inviting proposition for evil to come right back into our lives, and far worse than what it ever was in the first place. I want to make just some very practical applications to this concept. You and I both understand that we need to be careful about the types of friends that we have in our lives. How many times, Old Testament and New, does the Bible tell us about make sure you choose your friends wisely? And we might look at that when we obey the gospel from the standpoint of, okay, I have these friends that are bad apples, and they're negative influences on me, and so I need to get them out of my life. You know, hopefully we keep them as acquaintances because they need God's help just like we need God's help. But at the same time, we understand I better not be spending inordinate amounts of time around them because they might get me to be like what they are. And so maybe we get rid of those friends that are bad apples, but what do we do to replace those friends? I think that's the mistake a lot of times that we make. And we think, well, if we get rid of the bad friends, there we go, problem solved. No, that's just step one in the proposition. But if you just get rid of the bad friends and you don't replace them with good friends who are positive influences on you, after a while you're going to get lonely. On a Friday night you're going to be sitting around and say, wait a minute, I don't have anybody to do anything with tonight. On a Saturday, well, who am I going to call and see how their day's going? Maybe we can get together and hang out for a while. There is nobody. And naturally you think, oh yeah, well I remember that friend I used to have and all the good time we used to have together. And then you kind of tend to overreact because you never want to be in that lonely state again. And maybe you get even more friends like that one that you had the first time and more bad influences in one's life than what it was at the beginning. I don't know if you've ever had a struggle with this in your life, but in earlier days, I listened to a lot of music that I shouldn't have been listening to. I'm just going to be very blunt with you. I listened to songs with lyrics that were filled with profanity, that disrespected God, that disrespected women, and that abused the body with drugs. I listened to songs like that. And you know, in my younger years, I really had a struggle with a number of these things, and especially keeping my mind pure. And after a while, I realized, you know, if I'm going to get serious about this Christianity thing, I need to fix that problem. Philippians 4:8, Fill your mind. Meditate on these things, whatever is true, holy, good, just, honorable, morally excellent. And so I made a conscious effort to try to stop listening to that kind of music. But here's the issue. I still to this day love music. So what do? I don't want anyone to think I'm criticizing any one genre of music. By the way, I'm not of the sort who believes that all country music is God's gift to humanity. Okay, there's some of that that's not real good either. That's true of any genre. But at the same time, there are actually good songs in every type of music as well. And that's one option a person has. I try not to do that because my difficulty, if I listen to one, I want to listen to all of them. And so I found something else that really helped me out. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of Praise and Harmony or the Zoe Group. Okay, a few that have. Well, these are groups that have excellent a cappella praise and worship music. I'm not unequivocally endorsing every piece of their work that they've ever done. But I bought all those CDs, about 25 of them I think it is combined. And whether on CDs or through my iPhone, I'll listen to those when I'm traveling. And I can tell you that I have noticed a profound difference in the way I think about things. But if I just left it at, well, cut out all the bad, see, me personally, I could really use replacing that with something good because I still love music. If I didn't replace it with something, I'd probably be much more tempted to go back to the old stuff. I had a real struggle. I don't know if anyone could relate to this one, but I watched a lot of movies in my younger years that I shouldn't have been watching them. Just like the music, filled with all of those same types of concepts. I realized I need to do better about that with which I'm filling my mind. And so I cut those out. But here's the thing about it. I still to this day love to watch movies. Do you like watching movies? That's okay. And one thing a person can do is just be very selective. There are still some good movies that come out. Obviously not nearly as many as used to. Has anyone ever heard of ClearPlay? Raise your hand. Have you heard of ClearPlay or VidAngel? Perhaps is an online streaming service. This one isn't, most of it anyway. But basically what it is, it's this Blu-ray player that you can buy and a subscription to it. And there's this company who has a professional staff, and they'll go through like every major movie and new releases as soon as they come out. And they create what are called filters for these movies. And so you can get a rated R movie, and you can set your filters for profanity, for blasphemy. You can set your filter for, if you want, drug usage and for sensual scenes and innuendos. Parents and grandparents, if you desire even disrespect to parents, you can do that. It's amazing. You can literally watch a rated R movie, but with none of the junk in it that you want to see. And it's completely legal because it doesn't edit the movie. It's just a filter that's been built for it. I don't want anyone to think I'm trying to peddle any of these products that I put in front of you. If you choose to go any of these routes, I don't benefit from that one bit, okay? I just want you to know that. And the second thing is this. I don't want you for a second to think I stand before you saying, I've got all these things figured out, just do what I've done. I don't. I'm still a work in progress. These are just a few things I found to be helpful because even though I try to cut out those junk movies, I still love to watch movies. If I didn't have something like this, it would be a lot more difficult to keep that evil influence out of my life. These are just a few practical applications. There's a host of them that each of us can make individually to our lives. But the point is this. Jesus is telling us, make sure for every evil influence you take out of your life, understand that you're leaving a void behind. That's an empty space. And if you don't fill that with some positive influence, it's eventually going to get filled with something. And if you won't fill it with positivity, there's only one other option left on the table. Eventually, it will get filled again with negativity. And in that case, Jesus says in verse 45, the last state of that man is typically worse than what it was in the first. And the human basic psychological reason for that is we tend to overreact to fill that void that is left in our lives. Jesus says, so shall it also be with this wicked generation. Translation to the people to whom Jesus is speaking, don't think you're going to be the exception to the rule. If you don't listen to me, And if you don't do what I tell you, you will not end up as the exception, but you will end up as the rule. If Jesus were directly speaking to us today, He would say, so shall it also be with this wicked generation. That's not a bit different, is it? That's true of any generation that's ever been. Don't think you can ignore His advice and that you're going to be the exception to the rule. Understand, if you ignore His advice, you're going to become the rule. Okay, we're done with the 3 verses in Matthew 12. Here's what I want you to do with me, if you'd be so kind. Let's flip over to Ephesians 4, and we're going to spend the rest of our time now here. This passage in Matthew 12 helped me to so much better understand Ephesians, the 4th chapter. And if you haven't already, maybe you have, I hope you can find some benefit in this as well. Remember what we read earlier. The first thing that we need to do in our Christian walk in Ephesians 4 is put off the old man. Get rid of your former sins. Get rid of all those evil influences that you have in your life. But the passage doesn't stop there. That's only where it starts. He continues in verses 23 and 24, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and that you put on the new man, which was created according to God in true righteousness and holiness. You see, if you just put off the old man, this whole Christianity thing doesn't work. There's a void that's left in your spiritual home. You've got to fill it with something, and you only have 2 choices. You can only fill it with evil, or you're going to fill it with good. He says, don't fill it with evil like it was before and make it worse than what it was in the first place. This time, fill it with good, what's proper and right things. On that basis, I'm going to set before you 3 very biblical suggestions tonight. And if you'll grant me the leniency, please give me just a minute before I tell you why I suggest these 3 things. For every one of us, and this isn't just you, this is every bit as much for me. Biblical suggestion number 1. Take advantage of every worship and every Bible study opportunity that your local congregation affords. If that's on the Lord's Day, do it on the Lord's Day. If that's on Wednesday, do it on Wednesday. Like this week, if it's on Monday or Tuesday, do it on Monday or Tuesday. If you got a weekend something going on in the church, do it on Friday. Do it on Saturday. Suggestion number 1 from the Scriptures, attend every worship service and every Bible study opportunity that your local congregation affords. Scriptural suggestion number 2. Take advantage of every true service opportunity your congregation affords. I realize I haven't been here very long, but I've already heard a number of the good works that are going on in this congregation. It's apparent this is a very active church. I know there are probably several visitors to this assembly tonight. What are the works of service that are going on in your church? There's a giveaway going on in Sebring, I think, of just about everything. Of food, I know. Of beds, I know for certain. I can't hardly walk through their house because of the beds that are waiting to be given away. There's furniture, tables I've seen, all kinds of. That's great. Are you involved in that effort? And if not, and you're not sure how to get involved, talk to whoever's in charge of it and let them know, hey, I want to do more with this. How could you use me in this effort? In my home congregation, just one of the several good works that we have going on, like you all, we have a nursing home singing that we do once every month for 2 different nursing homes. And I can tell you that whenever we started doing that, my thinking was, okay, these elderly folks who are shut in, they need this from us and the encouragement we can get. And hopefully they get some great benefit out of that, and I think they do. But I can tell you this, there have been a number of times, I'm being open with you, I thought, I am worn out at the end of a Sunday. You know how that works. And I really didn't feel like I had the energy to do it. But I knew, well, that's a good service opportunity. Going to go do it anyway. And I found out that after we did that as a church group together, and we visited with those very kind people, and afterward when we go out to a restaurant and we would eat, and we would laugh together, and we get home way too late, I had trouble going to bed at night because I was so excited about what had taken place. And I realized even though this is an effort designed more to help those people, I'm not so sure but what we're not getting more benefit out of it than what they are. That's always true with church service. Take advantage of whatever it is, every church service opportunity your congregation provides. And the number 3 scriptural suggestion is this one. Invite a person, a couple, or a Christian family over into your home for dinner and visit with them one evening every week. And not the same one, but do a different one every time. Now, if someone comes to you first and they ask you, that's fine. You can go do that one that week instead. Or if you ask the first person, well, so-and-so said they're not going to go. I guess we're not going to do it this week. Well, go ask somebody else. They may not be able to do it. Go ask a third person, couple, or family. Extend Christian hospitality and receive it as well from those who extend it to you. Now, you might be wondering, okay, why is he giving us all of these suggestions? Here's the reason I suggest these things. I know there are people in this room who have seen a lot more in the church through the years than what I have. But this is one observation that I've made from the church, or about the church through the years. I have never known of a single Christian who, while attending every worship service and every Bible study opportunity with the church, who, while taking advantage of every service opportunity that the church provided, who, while having Christians into their home or going into other Christians' homes every week, I've never known of a single Christian, not one case, to fall away from God while all three of these things are taking place. But of the countless people that I've seen give up on the Lord through the years, all of them began absenting themselves from one of these opportunities, which shortly thereafter became two of these opportunities, which shortly thereafter became all three of these opportunities until they completely quit. Don't forget that Christianity is more than about getting all the bad things out of your life. It's about filling your life with as many good things as you possibly can. I want you to continue on with me in Ephesians 4, verse 25. Therefore, putting away lying. That's a bad thing. We shouldn't do that. Okay, here's the resolution I make. I'm struggling with lying, so I'm never going to open my mouth and say anything else. That's an overreaction, isn't it? Well, that's good you've gotten rid of the evil, but that mouth's been given to us for a reason. Don't use it for evil, but use it for good. Let each of you speak truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. Don't forget to replace that void, else the evil speech of lying is going to come back into it and it's going to be worse than what it was the first time. Verses 26 and 27, be angry and do not sin. This one's kind of implied. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath, nor give place to the devil. The negative teaching here, quote unquote, is don't be filled with unrighteous anger and don't hang on to your anger for too long. Okay, well, I'm just going to try to never get angry about anything ever again. Question, who made the emotion of anger? Who showed anger multiple times on the earth, and he laid a perfect example down for us? You see, there are times that we should be angry, but with righteous anger, and when we get angry, we should address what that anger is and not hang on to it endlessly for years. Get rid of the evil anger, but replace it with a positive and a righteous anger. Verse 28, let him who stole steal no longer. That's bad. We shouldn't do that. But rather let him labor, working with his hands what is good, that he may have something to give to him who has need. Have you ever noticed where the highest crime rates in our country are? They're always in the same locations. And please, nobody take it this way. This has absolutely nothing to do with race. All races have contributed to what the issue is. But have you noticed that in our inner cities, crime rates are always the highest? Violent crimes are the highest. Theft of property is always the highest. Why is there so much evil that takes place within our inner cities? Is it a coincidence that this is always often the location of where labor participation rates are the lowest? God has a will for every able-bodied person, and that's to work for a living for himself and or his family. But when you have that absence of good, there's a void that's left over. And it's going to get filled up with something, and if you won't fill it with good, it's going to get filled up with evil. You got to have things, but if you won't do the good things to have them, there's only one option left. You have to do the bad thing to have those things, don't you? Isn't that such a simple fix from the Scriptures? Stop doing the wrong thing of stealing. Well, okay, well now I have a space. What do I do with all my time? Work for a living. Fill it with something good. Verse 29, let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth. And really the context here is about unfairly of what's given to others so as to tear them down. But instead what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers. Has anybody mastered this yet? Let us know. Please write a success story in a book so we can all read it and perfectly know how to do this. We all struggle with it, don't we? Why is it that we have such difficulty in unfairly tearing others down? Because of the time that we've devoted to doing so. But if we do what the Lord says to fix the problem perfectly, what if we spent more time talking about the positive characteristics of people? What if we filled our time with doing that? You see, there's no space left over to tear others down unfairly with our speech. Verses 31 and 32, let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, which is loud shouting at one another, and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. Those are bad things. We don't want any of those things in our lives. Okay, well, how do I permanently fix it, though? Fill that void with good. Verse 32, and be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God in Christ forgave you. Instead of loudly shouting it at one another and tearing one another down behind each other's backs, instead, what if we were kind to each other? And we filled our time with that. There's no time left for the other, is there? Instead of being angry and wrathful toward one another, what about instead if we were tender-hearted and we truly cared about one another? Instead of hanging on to feelings of bitterness for years of how these people did me, what if instead we forgave them just as God in Christ forgave us? You see the two-step fix to the problem? Get rid of the evil out of your house, but don't leave it in that state. There's so much more to Christianity than that. It's not about the evil that we've kicked out only. It's also about the good that God has told us to use to replace it. As you look at your life tonight and your spiritual house of which you've begun construction, what is it that you see in it? Are there some evil things that you could use to clean out? Maybe you've done that and you look at your life now, is it filled with good things? Are you taking advantage of every worshipful and Bible study opportunity that the church provides? Are you capitalizing on every church service chance that God has given you? Are you spending lots of time with good Christian people in your home and in their homes and in doing things out in the community together and enjoying your time with one another? These are good things that we can use that we might fill our lives with it so that we don't have to worry as much about evil creeping back into them because there's just no space that's left over for it. Have you begun the construction of your spiritual home yet? You know, Jesus talks about that in Matthew chapter 7. He says, everyone who hears me and puts into practice my sayings builds his spiritual house on the solid rock. And as we know very well from that story, it's all about the foundation as to whether that house stands the test of time. Have you begun the construction of your spiritual home, one that's not built on evil but on complete and utter righteousness and that can be filled with the goodness of Christ? You know, the Bible tells us that if we will allow others to know of our trust in Jesus, that solid foundation, Romans 10 verses 9 and 10, if we'll give our will over to Christ's and be baptized into His name, Acts 2:38, all the evil in our lives that we've done more or less is erased. It's just like we'd never done any of those things. And the construction of our spiritual home on that solid foundation has begun. As you look at your spiritual home, on what foundation is it built? What is in your house? Tonight, very lovingly and very humbly, we let you know that if we can help you in getting some evil as your brothers and sisters in Christ out of your life, if we can be an encouragement to you and pray for you to have your life filled with more goodness, we'd be glad to do that. The only thing maybe that could supersede that is if we can be an aid to you tonight in helping you start the construction of your solid spiritual home. If you'll let us do that, it would sure be our treat. If you'd come and let me know while we stand and